PMP Interview Questions with Answers by Biswajit. If you have not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and like. Project Management Professional, PMP, Certification. The Project Management Professional, PMP, certification is a globally recognized credential awarded by the Project Management Institute, PMI, to project managers who meet their requirements for education and experience, pass a rigorous examination, and agree to abide by a professional code of ethics. The certification is intended to demonstrate that the holder has the knowledge, skills, and experience required to lead and direct projects effectively. Obtaining the PMP certification can provide several benefits to a project manager's career, including enhanced credibility and recognition. The PMP is a well-respected and globally recognized certification that can help project managers stand out in a crowded job market and gain the trust and respect of their colleagues and stakeholders. Improved job opportunities. Many employers require or prefer PMP certification for project management positions, particularly in industries such as construction, engineering, and IT. Increased earning potential. According to PMI's salary survey, PMP certified project managers earn an average of 23% more than their non-certified peers. Professional development. The process of preparing for and obtaining the PMP certification requires project managers to deepen their knowledge of project management concepts, frameworks, and best practices, which can help them become more effective and efficient in their roles. Networking opportunities. PMP certification provides access to a global community of project managers and other professionals who are committed to advancing the field of project management, which can lead to valuable networking opportunities and professional connections. Overall, obtaining the PMP certification can be a valuable investment for project managers who want to advance their careers and demonstrate their commitment to excellence in project management. What is the PMP certification? The Project Management Professional, PMP, certification is a globally recognized credential awarded by the Project Management Institute, PMI, to project managers who meet their requirements for education and experience, pass a rigorous examination, and agree to abide by a professional code of ethics. What are the eligibility requirements for the PMP exam? To be eligible to take the PMP exam, you must have a 4-year degree, bachelor's or global equivalent, and at least 3 years of project management experience, with 4,500 hours leading and directing projects and 35 hours of project management education. Alternatively, you can have a high school diploma or equivalent with at least 5 years of project management experience, with 7,500 hours leading and directing projects and 35 hours of project management education. What topics are covered in the PMP exam? The PMP exam covers 5 domains: initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and controlling, and closing. These domains are based on the Project Management Body of Knowledge, PMBOK, guide, which is a widely recognized standard for project management. How many questions are on the PMP exam? The PMP exam consists of 180 multiple-choice questions, which must be completed within 4 hours. What is the passing score for the PMP exam? The passing score for the PMP exam is determined by a psychometric analysis, and therefore varies with each exam administration. The passing score is not disclosed to candidates. How long is the PMP certification valid? The PMP certification is valid for 3 years. To maintain the certification, you must earn 60 professional development units, PDUs, every 3 years, which can be earned through various activities such as attending training courses, participating in professional organizations, and contributing to the project management community. The 5 domains in PMP with input and output. The PMP exam covers 5 domains, each of which includes a set of processes that are used in project management. The 5 domains, along with their associated processes, inputs, tools and techniques, and outputs, are initiating. This domain involves the processes necessary to define a new project or a new phase of an existing project. It includes the following processes: Develop project charter. Inputs include business case, contract, and enterprise environmental factors. Outputs include project charter and assumptions log. Identify stakeholders. Inputs include project charter, stakeholder register, and enterprise environmental factors. Outputs include stakeholder register and stakeholder management strategy. Planning. This domain involves the processes necessary to establish the scope, refine objectives, and define the course of action required to achieve project goals. It includes the following processes. Develop project management plan. Inputs include project charter, stakeholder register, and enterprise environmental factors. Outputs include project management plan and subsidiary plans. Collect requirements. Inputs include project charter, stakeholder register, and enterprise environmental factors. Outputs include requirements documentation and requirements traceability matrix. Define scope. Inputs include project charter, requirements documentation, and enterprise environmental factors. Outputs include project scope statement and project document updates. Executing. This domain involves the processes necessary to complete the work defined in the project management plan to satisfy the project specifications. It includes the following processes. Direct and manage project work. Inputs include project management plan, approved change requests, and enterprise environmental factors. Outputs include deliverables and work performance data. Perform quality assurance. Inputs include project management plan, quality metrics, and enterprise environmental factors. Outputs include quality improvements and change requests. Monitoring and controlling. This domain involves the processes necessary to track, review, and regulate the progress and performance of the project. It includes the following processes. Monitor and control project work. Inputs include project management plan, work performance data, and enterprise environmental factors. Outputs include change requests and work performance information. Control quality. Inputs include project management plan, quality metrics, and enterprise environmental factors. Outputs include quality control measurements and verified deliverables. Closing. This domain involves the processes necessary to finalize all activities across all domains to formally close the project or phase. It includes the following processes. Close project or phase. Inputs include project management plan, project or phase deliverables, and enterprise environmental factors. Outputs include final product, service, or result transition and organizational process assets updates. These are just a few examples of the inputs, tools, and techniques, and outputs for each process in the 5 domains of PMP. A more comprehensive list can be found in the PMP guide. Project Charter with components. Project Charter is a high-level document that outlines the project's purpose, objectives, and scope. It is typically developed during the initiating phase of a project and is used as a reference throughout the project's life cycle. The project charter provides a clear understanding of what the project will deliver, what its goals are, and how success will be measured. Here are some of the key components of a project charter. Project description. This section outlines the project's purpose and objectives. It includes a brief summary of the project, the problem or opportunity it addresses, and the intended outcome or deliverable. For example, the project aims to develop a new online booking system for a hotel chain to improve its customer experience and increase revenue. Project scope. This section defines the boundaries of the project, what is included and what is not. It outlines the project's deliverables, key features, and objectives. For example, the project will include the development of a booking system that integrates with the hotel's existing website, allows customers to book rooms online, and provides real-time availability. Project objectives. This section defines the project's objectives and the desired outcome. It outlines the measurable outcomes the project is expected to deliver, including time, cost, and quality goals. For example, the project objectives include delivering the booking system within 6 months, at a cost of $500,000, with an error rate of less than 2%. Stakeholder identification. This section identifies the stakeholders involved in the project, including project sponsors, customers, and team members. It outlines their roles, responsibilities, and expectations. For example, stakeholders for this project include the hotel chain's executive team, IT department, and customers who will use the booking system. The project sponsor is the Chief Operating Officer, and the project manager is responsible for ensuring stakeholder expectations are met. Risks and assumptions. This section identifies the risks and assumptions associated with the project. It outlines the potential risks that could impact the project's success, and how they will be mitigated. For example, risks associated with the project include delays due to technical issues or changes in requirements. The project team assumes that the hotel's IT infrastructure is compatible with the new booking system. Success criteria. This section defines the criteria that will be used to measure the success of the project. It outlines the key performance indicators that will be used to evaluate the project's performance. For example, success criteria for the project include delivering the system on time, within budget, with a high degree of functionality and usability, and achieving a customer satisfaction rate of at least 90%. The project charter is a vital document for project management. It ensures all stakeholders have a clear understanding of the project's goals, objectives, and scope. It serves as a reference throughout the project's life cycle and helps to ensure the project is completed on time, within budget, and to the required quality standards. Stakeholder management quadrant of stakeholder. Stakeholder management is the process of identifying, analyzing, and engaging with individuals, groups, or organizations that have an interest or a stake in a project. Effective stakeholder management involves identifying the stakeholders, understanding their needs and expectations, and developing strategies to engage with them throughout the project's life cycle. Stakeholders can be placed in one of four quadrants based on their level of interest and their level of influence on the project. The four quadrants are as follows. High power, high interest. These stakeholders are the most critical to the success of the project. They have a high level of influence over the project and a high level of interest in its outcomes. They should be engaged closely and managed carefully to ensure their needs are met, and they remain supportive of the project. High power, low interest. These stakeholders have a high level of influence over the project, but they have a low level of interest in its outcomes. They may include senior executives, regulatory bodies, or other stakeholders with a stake in the project's success. These stakeholders should be kept informed about the project's progress but do not need to be engaged in the same way as those in the first quadrant. Low power, high interest. These stakeholders have a high level of interest in the project but a low level of influence. They may include community groups, customers, or other stakeholders with a vested interest in the project's outcomes. They should be engaged with regularly and kept informed of the project's progress. Low power, low interest. These stakeholders have a low level of influence over the project and a low level of interest in its outcomes. They may include members of the general public or other stakeholders with little or no stake in the project's success. These stakeholders may be monitored but do not need to be actively engaged. The placement of stakeholders in these quadrants can help project managers to develop targeted strategies for engaging with stakeholders throughout the project's life cycle. By understanding the needs and expectations of different stakeholders, project managers can develop effective communication and engagement strategies that help to ensure stakeholder support and project success. Stakeholder examples for each quadrant using Agile. Here are some examples of stakeholders for each quadrant using an Agile project management approach. High power, high interest. These stakeholders have a high level of influence over the project and a high level of interest in its outcomes. Examples of stakeholders in this quadrant for an Agile project might include product owners. They are responsible for defining the project vision and prioritizing features and requirements. They have a high level of interest in the project's success and are highly influential in shaping the direction of the project. Scrum Masters. They are responsible for facilitating the Scrum process and ensuring that the Agile principles are being followed. They have a high level of influence over the project's success and are highly engaged in the project's outcomes. Senior management, they have a high level of influence over the project's success and a high level of interest in its outcomes. They may be involved in making strategic decisions related to the project and provide support and resources to ensure its success. High power, low interest, these stakeholders have a high level of influence over the project but a low level of interest in its outcomes. Examples of stakeholders in this quadrant for an Agile project might include regulatory bodies. They have a significant influence over the project's success but may not have a vested interest in its outcomes. They may be involved in ensuring compliance with regulations or standards and may require periodic updates on the project's progress. Legal advisors, they may provide guidance on legal and regulatory issues related to the project. They have a high level of influence over the project but may not be highly engaged in its outcomes. Low power, high interest, these stakeholders have a high level of interest in the project but a low level of influence over its outcomes. Examples of stakeholders in this quadrant for an Agile project might include end users. They are the primary beneficiaries of the project's outcomes and have a high level of interest in its success. They may provide feedback on features and functionality and may participate in user testing and validation. Community groups, they may be impacted by the project's outcomes and have a high level of interest in its success. They may provide feedback on issues related to social responsibility or sustainability. Low power, low interest, these stakeholders have a low level of influence over the project and a low level of interest in its outcomes. Examples of stakeholders in this quadrant for an Agile project might include vendors or suppliers. They may provide goods or services to the project but have little or no stake in its success. General public, they may be aware of the project's existence but have no direct involvement or interest in its outcomes. Stakeholder register with example. Stakeholder register is a document that contains information about all the stakeholders involved in a project. It is a key tool for stakeholder management, as it helps project managers to identify and track stakeholders throughout the project's life cycle. Here is an example of a stakeholder register. Stakeholder name, John Smith. Stakeholder type, customer. Stakeholder interest, high. Stakeholder influence, low. Stakeholder role, end user. Stakeholder contact information, johnsmith@email.com. Stakeholder expectations, wants a user-friendly interface and timely delivery of the project. Stakeholder communication needs, regular updates on project progress and new feature releases. Stakeholder engagement strategy, involve in user testing and validation, provide regular updates on project progress and feature releases. In this example, John Smith is a customer who has a high level of interest in the project's outcomes but a low level of influence. He is an end user of the project and his contact information is provided for communication purposes. His expectations are that the project will have a user-friendly interface and be delivered on time. The communication needs and engagement strategy for John Smith include regular updates on project progress and new feature releases, as well as involving him in user testing and validation. The stakeholder register typically includes additional information such as the stakeholder's position or organization, their level of expertise or influence, their expectations or concerns, and their potential impact on the project's success. It is an important document for project managers to track and manage stakeholders effectively throughout the project's life cycle. Collect requirements. Collecting requirements is an essential step in project management, as it helps to identify and define the scope of the project and its deliverables. Here are the steps to effectively collect requirements. Identify stakeholders. Identify all the stakeholders involved in the project and their role in it. Stakeholders can be anyone who is impacted by the project, including customers, users, project team members, and management. Define the scope of the project. Clearly define the project's goals, objectives, and outcomes. This will help you to understand what is required to achieve the project's objectives. Determine the requirements gathering technique. select the appropriate technique to gather requirements based on the project's size, complexity, and stakeholder involvement. Techniques include interviews, focus groups, surveys, observation, and brainstorming. Conduct requirements gathering sessions. Conduct sessions with stakeholders to gather requirements. Use the selected techniques to elicit requirements and gather feedback on the project's scope, goals, and objectives. Document requirements. Document all the requirements gathered during the sessions. Use a standard template to document requirements to ensure consistency and completeness. Prioritize requirements. Prioritize requirements based on their importance, urgency, and feasibility. This will help to manage project resources effectively. Validate requirements. Validate requirements with stakeholders to ensure they meet their needs and expectations. This will help to ensure that the project delivers the expected outcomes. Manage requirements. Manage requirements throughout the project's life cycle. Track changes to requirements, update documentation, and ensure that requirements are being met. By following these steps, you can effectively collect requirements and ensure that your project delivers the expected outcomes. It is important to involve stakeholders throughout the process to ensure that requirements are aligned with their needs and expectations. Define the scope of the project. Defining the scope of a project is a critical step in project management that sets the boundaries of what is and isn't included in the project. It is essential to define the scope to ensure that everyone involved in the project understands what needs to be accomplished and what resources are required to achieve it. Here are the steps to define the scope of a project. Identify project objectives. Clearly define the objectives of the project, including what the project will deliver, the benefits it will provide, and the problem it will solve. This will help to align the project with the organization's strategic goals. Identify project requirements. Identify the specific requirements needed to achieve the project objectives. This can include resources, tools, personnel, and other constraints. Identify project deliverables. Define the specific deliverables that the project will produce, such as reports, software, hardware, or other products. This will help to define the scope of the project and determine the project's boundaries. Identify project exclusions. Define what is not included in the project's scope, such as features or functions that are not necessary for achieving the project objectives. This will help to prevent scope creep, which can cause delays and cost overruns. Define project constraints. Identify any constraints that may impact the project, such as time, budget, resources, and technical limitations. This will help to manage the project within the boundaries of the constraints. Define project assumptions. Identify any assumptions that have been made about the project, such as the availability of resources or the acceptance of the project by stakeholders. This will help to manage risks associated with these assumptions. Get stakeholders' approval. Obtain approval from all stakeholders on the scope statement. This will ensure that everyone is on the same page regarding the project's objectives, deliverables, and boundaries. By following these steps, you can effectively define the scope of your project and ensure that it aligns with your organization's strategic goals. It is important to involve stakeholders throughout the process to ensure that the scope statement meets their needs and expectations. Define the scope of the project. Defining the scope of a project is a critical step in project management that sets the boundaries of what is and isn't included in the project. It is essential to define the scope to ensure that everyone involved in the project understands what needs to be accomplished and what resources are required to achieve it. Here are the steps to define the scope of a project. Identify project objectives. Clearly define the objectives of the project, including what the project will deliver, the benefits it will provide, and the problem it will solve. This will help to align the project with the organization's strategic goals. Identify project requirements. Identify the specific requirements needed to achieve the project objectives. This can include resources, tools, personnel, and other constraints. Identify project deliverables. Define the specific deliverables that the project will produce, such as reports, software, hardware, or other products. This will help to define the scope of the project and determine the project's boundaries. Identify project exclusions. define what is not included in the project scope, such as features or functions that are not necessary for achieving the project objectives. This will help to prevent scope creep, which can cause delays and cost overruns. Define project constraints. Identify any constraints that may impact the project, such as time, budget, resources, and technical limitations. This will help to manage the project within the boundaries of the constraints. Define project assumptions. Identify any assumptions that have been made about the project, such as the availability of resources or the acceptance of the project by stakeholders. This will help to manage risks associated with these assumptions. Get stakeholders' approval. Obtain approval from all stakeholders on the scope statement. This will ensure that everyone is on the same page regarding the project's objectives, deliverables, and boundaries. By following these steps, you can effectively define the scope of your project and ensure that it aligns with your organization's strategic goals. It is important to involve stakeholders throughout the process to ensure that the scope statement meets their needs and expectations. Requirements gathering technique. Selecting the right requirements gathering technique is crucial to the success of a project. There are several techniques available, and the selection of the right technique depends on the project's size, complexity, and stakeholder involvement. Here are the steps to determine the requirements gathering technique. Understand the project's scope. Before selecting a requirements gathering technique, it's essential to understand the project's scope, including its objectives, deliverables, and stakeholders. Identify stakeholders. Identify all the stakeholders involved in the project, including customers, users, project team members, and management. Consider their availability, location, and willingness to participate in the requirements gathering process. Consider the project size and complexity. Determine the size and complexity of the project. Large and complex projects may require more extensive requirements gathering techniques, such as workshops, focus groups, or interviews. Consider the project timeline. Determine the project's timeline, including the duration of the requirements gathering process. Some techniques, such as surveys or questionnaires, can be completed relatively quickly, while others, such as interviews or focus groups, may require more time. Consider the available resources. Consider the available resources, including the project team, budget, and technology. Some techniques, such as surveys or questionnaires, require less manpower and technology, while others, such as focus groups or workshops, require more resources. Select the appropriate technique, based on the project's scope, size, complexity, timeline, and available resources. Select the appropriate technique to gather requirements. Examples of requirements gathering techniques include interviews, one-on-one conversations with stakeholders to gather information about their needs and expectations. Focus groups, a group of stakeholders who discuss their views and opinions on the project's goals and objectives. Surveys/questionnaires, a set of questions sent to stakeholders to gather their opinions and feedback. Observation, observing stakeholders performing their tasks to understand their needs and expectations. Brainstorming, a group activity where stakeholders share ideas and generate new solutions. By following these steps, you can determine the appropriate requirements gathering technique for your project, which will ensure that you collect the necessary information to successfully deliver the project's objectives. Requirements gathering technique. Requirements gathering techniques are methods used to collect information from stakeholders about what they need and expect from a project. These techniques are critical in project management as they help to ensure that the project is aligned with stakeholder needs and expectations. Here are some common requirements gathering techniques. Interviews, one-on-one meetings with stakeholders to gather their opinions, ideas, and feedback. Interviews can be conducted in person, via phone, or video conferencing, and are useful for understanding stakeholder perspectives. Focus groups, a facilitated group discussion involving stakeholders to collect feedback and opinions on specific topics related to the project. Focus groups can be conducted in person or virtually and are useful for generating ideas and gathering a wide range of perspectives. Surveys/questionnaires, A set of questions sent to stakeholders to gather feedback on specific topics related to the project. Surveys can be conducted online or on paper and are useful for collecting a large amount of data from a large number of stakeholders. Workshops, interactive group sessions led by a facilitator to generate ideas, develop requirements, and build consensus among stakeholders. Workshops can be conducted in person or virtually and are useful for generating ideas and building stakeholder engagement. Observation, the act of observing stakeholders performing their tasks to understand their needs and expectations. Observation is useful for understanding how stakeholders work and identifying areas for improvement. Prototyping, the creation of a working model of the product or service to collect feedback and identify potential issues. Prototyping is useful for visualizing the end product and getting stakeholder feedback early in the development process. Job shadowing, the act of following a stakeholder around as they perform their tasks to understand their needs and expectations. Job shadowing is useful for understanding how stakeholders work and identifying areas for improvement. By using a combination of these techniques, project managers can gather the necessary information to ensure that the project meets stakeholder needs and expectations. Conduct workshops for requirement gathering. Conducting workshops is an effective way to gather requirements from stakeholders, as it allows for interactive discussions, brainstorming, and consensus building. Here are the steps to conduct a workshop for requirements gathering. Define the workshop objectives. Before conducting the workshop, define the objectives and outcomes you want to achieve. Determine what specific topics you want to cover and what information you want to collect from stakeholders. Identify the stakeholders, determine who should participate in the workshop. Invite stakeholders from different departments or areas of expertise to ensure that you have a diverse group of participants. Develop the workshop agenda. Create an agenda that outlines the activities, topics, and discussions that will take place during the workshop. Make sure to allocate sufficient time for each activity and ensure that the agenda aligns with the workshop objectives. Prepare the workshop materials. Create materials such as handouts, presentation slides, and whiteboards to support the discussions and activities during the workshop. Make sure that all materials are clear, concise, and easy to understand. Conduct the workshop. Begin the workshop by introducing the agenda and objectives. Use icebreakers and warm-up activities to get participants engaged and comfortable. Facilitate discussions and activities to collect information from stakeholders, encourage collaboration and brainstorming, and build consensus. Document the results. Document the results of the workshop, including notes, ideas, and feedback. Use templates such as mind maps, decision matrices, or other visual aids to organize the information and make it easier to analyze later. Follow up. After the workshop, follow up with participants to ensure that all information has been captured accurately and to address any questions or concerns. Use the information gathered during the workshop to develop requirements documentation, such as a requirements specification or user stories. By following these steps, project managers can conduct effective workshops for requirements gathering, which will ensure that the project meets stakeholder needs and expectations. Making requirement gathering workshops to be more effective. To make requirement gathering workshops more effective, here are some tips. Prepare in advance. Ensure that the workshop is well planned and organized. Develop an agenda and prepare materials in advance so that the workshop can run smoothly and efficiently. Define clear objectives. Clearly define the objectives and outcomes you want to achieve in the workshop. Ensure that all participants understand the objectives and the desired outcome. Invite the right stakeholders. Invite stakeholders who have relevant knowledge and expertise related to the project. Ensure that you have a diverse group of participants who represent different departments or areas of expertise. Create a positive and inclusive atmosphere. Create an environment where participants feel comfortable and encouraged to share their ideas and opinions. Use icebreakers and warm-up activities to get participants engaged and comfortable. Use effective facilitation techniques. Facilitate discussions and activities in a way that encourages participation and collaboration. Use techniques such as brainstorming, mind mapping, and SWOT analysis to encourage creativity and generate new ideas. Encourage active participation. Encourage all participants to actively participate and contribute to the discussions and activities. Ensure that everyone has an opportunity to share their ideas and opinions. Capture and document all information. Use templates such as mind maps, decision matrices, or other visual aids to organize the information and make it easier to analyze later. Ensure that all information is captured and documented accurately. Follow up after the workshop. Follow up with participants after the workshop to ensure that all information has been captured accurately and to address any questions or concerns. Use the information gathered during the workshop to develop requirements documentation, such as a requirements specification or user stories. By following these tips, project managers can make requirement gathering workshops more effective, which will ensure that the project meets stakeholder needs and expectations. How to avoid scope creep. Scope creep refers to the uncontrolled growth of project scope, which can lead to budget overruns, delays, and a project that fails to meet stakeholder expectations. Here are some tips for avoiding scope creep. Clearly define the project scope. Ensure that the project scope is clearly defined and communicated to all stakeholders. Use a project charter, requirements document, or other project management tools to document and communicate the scope. Develop a change management process. Establish a formal change management process to manage any changes to the project scope. This process should include a system for requesting, evaluating, approving, and implementing changes. Involve stakeholders in scope decisions. Involve stakeholders in scope decisions to ensure that their expectations are aligned with the project's scope. Communicate the impact of any changes to the scope on the project timeline, budget, and resources. Use a prioritization system. Use a prioritization system to ensure that project tasks and requirements are ranked in order of importance. This will help to ensure that the project team focuses on the most critical tasks and requirements first. Monitor progress and track changes. Monitor project progress and track any changes to the project scope. Use project management software or other tools to track project tasks, budget, and resources. Educate the project team. Educate the project team on the importance of managing the project scope and the consequences of scope creep. Ensure that all team members understand the project goals and objectives, and how their work contributes to the overall project success. By following these tips, project managers can effectively manage the project scope and avoid scope creep, which will ensure that the project stays on track and meets stakeholder expectations. How Change Management Board to be formed. A Change Management Board, CMB, is a group of stakeholders responsible for reviewing and approving changes to a project. Here are the steps for forming a change management board. Identify the stakeholders. Identify the stakeholders who will be involved in the change management process. This may include project managers, team leads, subject matter experts, and senior executives. Define the roles and responsibilities. Define the roles and responsibilities of each member of the CMB. This may include responsibilities such as reviewing change requests, evaluating the impact of changes on the project, and approving or rejecting change requests. Establish the decision-making process. Establish a decision-making process for the CMB. This may include defining the criteria for evaluating change requests, establishing a voting process, and setting up a system for documenting and communicating decisions. Set up a communication plan. Set up a communication plan for the CMB. This may include defining how stakeholders will be notified of changes, how often the CMB will meet, and how information will be shared and documented. Determine the escalation process. Determine the escalation process for the CMB. This may include defining how to escalate issues that cannot be resolved by the CMB or how to escalate changes that require additional resources or budget. Train the CMB members. Train the CMB members on the change management process, including their roles and responsibilities, the decision-making process, and the communication plan. By following these steps, Project managers can effectively form a change management board and ensure that changes are managed in a structured and controlled manner, which will reduce the risk of project delays, budget overruns, and scope creep. What are the 10 knowledge areas in PMP? The PMP, Project Management Professional, exam tests the knowledge and skills of project management professionals in various domains of project management. The 10 knowledge areas of PMP are: Project Integration Management. This involves coordinating all aspects of the project, including managing project changes, implementing project management plans, and directing project work. Project Scope Management. This involves defining, managing, and controlling the project's scope, including defining project requirements, creating the work breakdown structure, WBS, and controlling project scope changes. Project Schedule Management. This involves creating and managing the project schedule, including developing a project timeline, sequencing project tasks, and controlling project schedule changes. Project Cost Management. This involves estimating and managing the project budget, including creating a cost management plan, estimating project costs, and controlling project costs. Project Quality Management. This involves ensuring that the project meets the quality requirements, including developing a quality management plan, implementing quality assurance and quality control, and measuring project performance. Project Resource Management. This involves managing project resources, including identifying and allocating resources, developing a resource management plan, and controlling project resources. Project Communications Management. This involves managing project communications, including developing a communications management plan, managing project stakeholders, and controlling project communications. Project Risk Management. This involves identifying, assessing, and managing project risks, including developing a risk management plan, identifying project risks, and controlling project risks. Project Procurement Management. This involves managing project procurement, including developing a procurement management plan, identifying potential suppliers, and managing project contracts. Project Stakeholder Management. This involves managing project stakeholders, including identifying stakeholders, managing stakeholder engagement, and controlling stakeholder engagement. These 10 knowledge areas represent the key areas of knowledge and skills required for project management professionals to successfully manage projects. How to deliver a project with fewer resources than planned using PMP. To deliver a project with fewer resources than originally planned using PMP, Project Management Professional, principles, you can follow these steps. Reassess the project scope, review the project scope and objectives, and determine if there are any areas that can be trimmed or eliminated to reduce the workload. This can help to ensure that the project is focused on the most important tasks and deliverables. Revise the project plan. Revisit the project plan and update it to reflect the new resource constraints. This may involve adjusting timelines, reducing the scope of work, or reprioritizing tasks. Identify critical path. Identify the critical path, which is the sequence of activities that must be completed on time in order to deliver the project successfully. Focus your efforts and resources on the critical path activities to ensure that they are completed on schedule. Optimize resource allocation. Optimize the use of available resources by assigning them to tasks that are most critical to the project's success. This can help to ensure that resources are used efficiently and effectively. Monitor project progress. Monitor project progress closely to identify any issues or risks that could impact project delivery. Use project management tools, such as Gantt charts and resource histograms, to track progress and identify areas where additional resources may be required. Communicate with stakeholders. Keep communication channels open with team members and stakeholders to ensure that everyone is aware of the reduced resources and the need to prioritize tasks. This can help to ensure that everyone is working together to achieve the project goals. Conduct risk management. Conduct risk management activities to identify and address any potential risks that could impact project delivery. This can help to minimize the impact of unforeseen events and ensure that the project stays on track. Evaluate project success. Evaluate the success of the project once it is completed. This can help to identify any areas where improvements can be made for future projects. By following these PMP principles, you can deliver a project with fewer resources than originally planned while ensuring that the project is completed on time and within budget. Thank you. Please don't trademark T forget to like and subscribe the videos. If you like this content, please let us know in comments what else would you like to hear from us.